Hi everyone, I'm Sherry and I'm back at it. It is time for us to now do a seasonal food, cranberries. Today I'm going to be making cranberry juice, okay? And so we're going to go through the steps of how to do it. It's one of the simplest things we can make. You know me, I like simple, so everything has to be simple. And so we're going to take you step by step and I'm going to show you the equipment that we're going to use to make this cranberry juice. Okay, we'll be back. Okay, I'm back, and here are our cranberries. They have been washed and sorted, because sometimes you may find some in there that are not perfect. And so they've already been done. So let me show you the equipment that we're going to be using. First, we're going to start off with a pot. This is not the traditional canning season, but I am canning. Cranberries are seasonal. This is the time of year in which these cranberries come out. So that's why I'm doing them now. Okay, but because of that, I put all my big equipment away and I leave around some smaller stuff in case something pops up that I want to can. Okay, so let's look at this pot. So when you're water bath canning, or pressure canning, you need to have a rack on the bottom of some sort to keep the jars from touching the very bottom because they can crack and break. All right, so I have here a 16-quart stock pot, and it's not your typical size. It's much smaller, and so the width is smaller, and so I just happen to have a cake rack cooler, and it fits in perfectly. Now, if you don't have a cake rack, you can take lids or rings and place them on the bottom, anything to keep the food from touching the very bottom. So our water's hot and ready. We're going to put the rack in. Our water to put into the jars is ready. Our water to pour over our lids is ready. It helps to have everything in a ready state so that as you go through this, it's much easier than scrambling around for your equipment, okay? So let's go back to the table and see what else we need. Okay, so some of the other items that you may need are a ladle for your water to put into the jars. And I have a magnetic lid lifter, and I'm going to use that when I put my hot water in here over my lids. Nowadays, Ball says you don't have to boil your lids like they did years ago, but I still put boiling hot water over them to soften the seal that's underneath of it. And so we're going to use this to lift it out because we don't want to burn ourselves, okay? And then we'll have the rings on to put it all together. Then we need the jar lifter to lift the hot jars, to put them in and take them out of the canner. All right, so my jars are in the dishwasher. They've been washed and sterilized, and so they're ready to go. So the thing is, we need to keep everything on the hot side. You shouldn't have extreme temperatures because that can create breakage, okay? So let's get started. Alrighty, now we're going to fill our jars, and we're going to take 2 cups of cranberries to every quart. We're using quart jars, okay, because we're making a juice. Now, my juice will not have any sweetener. And the reason is because I'm canning it for medicinal purposes. You know, one of the things I recommend if you have a UTI is cranberry juice. And it has a lot of other nutrients. But when you're dealing with a illness like UTI, if you put sugar, sugar feeds the bad bacteria. You want the straight plain. And you don't need a lot of it when you take it, maybe 1/4 of a cup or 1/2 a cup so many times a day. And so if you need it to be sweetened for other purposes, for drinking, you can do that after the fact. But my first priority is for medicinal purposes. So I'm going to take and fill these jars with 2 cups of cranberries. And I forgot to show you my funnel. Funnels come in different sizes or different types. They have plastic, they have this stainless steel, and other type of materials. So we're putting 2 cups, as you can see, in our jars, okay? And then we're going to put in our water. But I'm going to finish filling the rest of the jars, and then we'll come back and put the water in, okay? All right, one of the things I put in my water, my water bath water, is vinegar, white vinegar. This is not for ingesting. This is to go in my pot. And it is going to help keep my jars clean from the sediment in well water. So you don't need a lot. Just take a little. That's it. Okay? And a lot of people use the vinegar also to wipe the edges of their jars. I find that water is sufficient, especially if I'm just going to do something that has water in it. So now let's go. We're going to fill the jars. Okay. One thing is very important, that when you're doing hot water bath, everything has to be hot. So our water here is hot, our jars were hot, and our water in our canner is hot, okay? And we're going to be filling the jars about to a 1/2 inch headspace. Now I guess you're wondering, well, where is the juice coming from? Well, this needs to sit in the jar for at least a couple of months as the cranberries leave their goodies in the water. And so this is going to turn, the water's going to turn all red and pretty color. Okay, it's not going to stay this color. Alrighty? So now I'm going to continue to fill the rest of these jars with the water, hot water.
What about the cranberries? What temperature should they be?
Okay, the cranberries could be room temperature.
Okay.
That's fine, because they're going to get hot from the water that we're putting in here. Okay? Alrighty, and we're going to now cover a few of them, cover these jars with our rings and lids, okay? So we're going to take and wet this. Some people use vinegar, but because this is just water mostly, I'm going to use water to wipe the edges to make sure nothing is on the edges to hinder our sealing process, okay? And over here, I put the hot water into the lid with the lids, and we're going to take those lids and we're going to put them on the jars. Simple? I'll say it is. Alrighty, so then we're going to put the rings on, finger tight, okay? You don't want to struggle and get down there and screw it on tight because that's going to interfere with the sealing process. It needs to breathe a little bit, okay? So finger tight, there we go. Now, I'm going to finish filling the rest of the jars and get them ready for the canner. See ya. As I'm filling the jars, normally if a person's going to be sweetening this to make it for a nice sweet juice, this is the time they would put the sugar in. And they would probably put about a half a cup per quart. You can put less or you can put more. But I choose not to. As I mentioned, this is going to be for medicinal purposes only. Okay? And so we'll be back when we finish filling. Okay, now we have our jars filled with our cranberries and water. Remember, no sweetener in this one. Okay? And now I'm going to put these hot jars into my canner. Now remember, I'm using a smaller canner right now because the big canning season is pretty much over. And so I've converted this 16-quart pot into a canner by using the rack that I showed you in the beginning. And this will hold 5 quarts. And we want to make sure that the water is at least 1 inch to 2 inches above the lid so it can be considered a true water bath. Okay, so we may have to add a little bit more water. Let's see. Oh, I think we got our inch. And normally for me, I use my knuckle as a measurement, and that's quick and it's good. Okay, I know to some people that's hot, but that means, but for me, the water is at proper height. Okay, now when this comes to a boil, that's when we set our timing. Now the timing is going to be based upon your altitude. If you live 1,000 feet above sea level, up to 1,000 feet, you would do this for 10 minutes. Mine is 2,000 something, so I have to add 5 minutes. So once it starts boiling, I am going to be putting the timer on for 15 minutes. And then after that, I let it sit for about 5 minutes to calm down. And that helps with any siphoning, which means the juice is squirting out of the jar. And then, so I'll let it sit, and then I take the jars out and let them sit and cool, okay? So I'll bring it back when that's all set. Okay, now our pot has come to a boil, and we're going to put the timer on. So I want you to see how it's a good rumbling boil. And remember, I said for my altitude, we got to set it for 15 minutes and not 10. Okay, so we're going to set our timer. And when the timer goes off and it's finished, I'm going to take the lid off for another 5 minutes before I pull it out of the water. And like I said, that will help it not to siphon, meaning all that liquid to come shooting out of the jar. Okay? So I'll bring it back when it's ready. Okay, our time is up. We took the lid off and let it sit for 5 minutes. And that helps it to calm down a little bit. So now we're going to take the jars out of the canner. And look at how beautiful the color is. Isn't that beautiful? Alrighty. So we have 5 jars in here. We're not going to tilt it a lot because that causes it also to lose some of its juices inside. And we don't want to lose juice at all. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let these sit on the side. And remember, when you're taking your jars out of a hot canner, you need to put them onto a cloth because the coldness of the counter can cause cracks in your jars because it's such an extreme difference in temperature. So always use a cloth when you put your food down out of the canner, your jars. So we're going to let these set for 12 to 24 hours. And you might still start hearing popping early, but you still got to wait at least 12 hours. And you take the rings off once they have sealed. And that's how we're going to store them. But let them completely cool before you do that. If you like this video, subscribe. And when you'll see the next ones that will come up, okay? Thank you.